I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday. The nurse's shoes squeaked on the cold floor, and the smell of disinfectant filled the air. I sat there, clutching my purse like it was my lifeline, praying under my breath. When the doctor came in, I could tell by his eyes, he wasn't bringing good news. He sat down, cleared his throat, and said, "Mrs. Henderson, the cancer has spread." I blinked at him, trying to understand the words that suddenly felt like thunder in my chest. Greater than, he said I had. Maybe 6 months. 6 months to put my affairs in order. 6 months to say goodbye to the world I had loved for 78 years. Greater than, I smiled at him. Can you believe that? I smiled, because I didn't want him to see me break. But when I walked out of that office, I didn't even make it to my car. I just sat down on the curb and cried. Cars passed. People stared. I didn't care. Everything inside me felt empty. Greater than. When my husband died, I thought that was pain. But this was different. Because now, it wasn't about losing someone I loved. It was about losing myself. The first thing I did when I got home was sit by the window where he used to read his Bible. I looked up and said, "Lord, I'm not ready to come home yet. If you still need me here, you'll have to prove it." And that was the moment my faith woke up. Greater than. The doctors gave me 6 months. But God, he had a different timeline. Grandma, gentle, reflective tone. Before the sickness came, my days were quiet, simple. I used to wake up before sunrise, just to make coffee the way my husband liked it, strong, with a little cinnamon. Even though he'd been gone for years, I still made 2 cups. One for him, one for me. Old habits are hard to bury. My little house was small, but it was full of memories. Wedding photos on the wall, his hat still hanging by the door, and that old Bible, worn from his hands, resting right where he left it. Sometimes, when I felt lonely, I'd run my fingers over the pages and imagine him sitting beside me, whispering, "Keep your faith, Ruth, God ain't done with you yet." I'd spend my afternoons tending to my garden, the same patch of soil we planted together when we first moved here. Roses, tulips, and marigolds. Each flower felt like a conversation with him. And when the neighborhood kids walked by, I'd wave at them. Sometimes even bake cookies for their birthdays. That was my joy, seeing people smile. I didn't have much, but I had peace. I had rhythm in my days, purpose in my small routines. I was the kind of woman who believed that faith wasn't just something you read about in church, it was something you lived quietly, even when no one saw. But I didn't realize how much that faith would be tested. Because life has a way of shaking the ground just when you think it's steady. Greater than. It started with a little pain in my back. Then came the fatigue, the shortness of breath, the weight loss. I told myself, it's just age. Nothing serious. But deep down, something inside me knew the storm was coming. Greater than. And when it finally came, it nearly took everything. I remember sitting there in that white room, staring at the wall clock. The second hand kept ticking, but my world, it had already stopped. The doctor's lips were moving, but I barely heard the words. "Stage 4, he said. We'll do everything we can, but you should prepare. Prepare for what? For dying. How do you prepare for that? Greater than. He said maybe 6 months. Maybe. I looked at him and said, "Son, I've lived long enough to know you don't put limits on God." He smiled politely, the kind of smile doctors use when they don't believe what you're saying, and handed me a pamphlet for hospice care. Greater than. When I got home that day, the silence was unbearable. No husband to hold my hand. No children running around. Just me and the echo of that word. Cancer. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my hands. The same hands that once cooked Thanksgiving dinner, braided my daughter's hair, wiped my husband's tears when we lost our first baby. And now they were shaking. Not from fear of dying, but from fear of dying alone. Greater than. That night, I lay in bed and talked to God like He was sitting in the chair beside me. I said, Lord, if this is the end, please, make it quick. But if you still have a reason for me to wake up tomorrow, show me. Greater than. And the next morning, I woke up. The sun was shining through the curtains. The same sun I thought I'd never see again. And I felt something. Not strength, not peace, not yet. But a whisper in my soul that said, hold on, greater than. I decided that day. I wasn't going to count months. I was going to count blessings. Greater than. I started writing letters to my son, my grandchildren, my pastor. I told them not to cry for me, but to pray with me. Because this wasn't the end. This was the battle before the miracle. That morning, I opened my Bible for the first time in months. It still smelled like my husband's cologne. The page I turned to wasn't random. I believe God flipped it for me. It said, with God, all things are possible. And I whispered back, then let's start with one more sunrise. I began small. I'd wake up, open my curtains, and thank God for another breath. Even when the pain in my chest burned. Even when I couldn't eat. Even when my body trembled. I still thanked Him. People think faith is loud, all shouting and hallelujahs. But real faith, it's quiet. It's whispering thank you while your world is falling apart. Some days, I wanted to give up. The chemo made me sick, my hair started falling out. And my son, he stopped visiting, said it was too hard to watch me like this. So I sat there, alone, holding the cross. My husband left me. And I said, if nobody else stays, I know you will, Lord. One evening, the nurse found me humming in my hospital bed. She said, you're always singing, even when you're in pain. Why? And I told her, because when I sing, the devil gets confused. He doesn't know if I'm hurting or healing. That night, I prayed not for a cure, but for courage. I said, if I'm going to fight, then make me strong enough to show others how to fight too. So I started visiting the other patients, bringing them little notes, reading them scripture, holding their hands. I didn't have much strength, but somehow, every time I helped someone smile, I felt stronger. Faith isn't something you hold, it's something that holds you. And every day I refused to let fear win. I could feel it. God was writing a new chapter. Doctors gave me 6 months. But my faith, it said, we'll see about that. Weeks passed, and my body got weaker. Some days, I couldn't even lift my head. But my spirit, oh, my spirit was still alive. Because every night, I'd tell God, if you're not done with me, then let me wake up again. And every morning, I did. Then one morning, something strange happened. My nurse, Claire, came in with tears in her eyes. She said, Miss Ruth, your test results came back, and they don't make sense. I smiled weakly and said, baby, sometimes faith doesn't make sense either. The cancer that had spread through my lungs had started shrinking. The doctors called it medical anomaly. I called it a miracle. For the first time in months, I stood up, even if just for a moment. I held onto the railing, my legs shaking, but my heart steady. The nurse clapped her hands and said, look at you, Miss Ruth, walking on faith. And I laughed, because that's exactly what it felt like. Every day after that, I walked a little more. Every night, I prayed a little longer. My body was healing, but more than that, my soul was being rebuilt. You know what's funny? The doctors wrote my healing down in charts. But what they didn't see was what happened inside me. That quiet strength rising from places I thought were long dead. That peace that comes when you stop asking why me, and start saying thank you anyway. They finally sent me home. I remember stepping outside for the first time. The wind touched my face. The sunlight kissed my skin. And I thought, I'm still here. Not because of luck, not because of doctors, but because faith decided my story wasn't over. I planted new flowers in the garden that week. Lilies, roses, and daffodils. My husband used to say, flowers are the earth's way of showing God's smile. So I filled my yard with smiles. 6 months passed. Then a year. Then another. I stopped counting time and started counting blessings again. When I walked out of that hospital, I didn't walk alone. I carried every prayer, every tear, and every name I whispered in that room with me. At first, I thought my story was just mine. But soon, people started calling. Women from church, old friends, even strangers. They'd say, "Miss Ruth, we heard what happened to you. How did you keep your faith when everything was falling apart?" I told them the truth. I didn't always have faith. Sometimes faith had to carry me. So I started visiting the hospital every Sunday. Not as a patient, but as a reminder. I'd walk through those halls with my scarf on, holding a little basket of flowers, handing them to people who had stopped believing. There was this one young woman, couldn't have been more than 35, sitting alone by her window, crying. I sat beside her and said, "Baby, I've been there. I thought my story was over too, but look at me now. God's still writing." She grabbed my hand and said, "If you can make it, maybe I can too." And right then, I realized something. Maybe my healing wasn't just for me. My story started to spread. At church, at the community center, even online, when someone recorded my testimony. People I'd never met wrote letters saying, "Miss Ruth, your words gave me strength." And every time I read one, I'd cry. Because I remember the nights I begged God for a reason to stay. And now, I had one. You see, sometimes God doesn't just heal your body. He heals your purpose. He takes what was broken and turns it into something that saves others. Now, every morning I look in the mirror. I don't see the woman who almost died. I see the woman who lived, not because she was strong, but because she believed. And if anyone watching this feels like their story is ending, baby, let me tell you, God still writes miracles. You just have to give him the pen. Sometimes, I still wake up at dawn and think about those hospital days. The cold floors, the sound of monitors, the nights I cried myself to sleep, asking, "Why me, Lord?" And now, when I sit here on this old porch with my cup of tea, I realize it was never why me. It was always for me. So I could see that even broken things can still bloom. You see, faith didn't remove the pain. It gave the pain a purpose. Doctors gave me 6 months. That was 5 years ago. And I'm still here not because of what they said, but because of what I believed. If you're watching this, baby, and you feel like giving up, don't let fear tell your story. Don't let pain write your ending. Because the same God who woke me up this morning is watching over you too. I'm not perfect. I still have my bad days. But every time I look at the sunrise, I remember I'm living on borrowed grace. And I'm going to use every breath to thank him for it. So if you're fighting your own battle, cancer, heartbreak, depression, whatever it is, don't count the months they give you. Count the moments God gives you. Because miracles, they don't always come with noise or lightning. Sometimes they just come with peace. My name is Ruth, and this is my miracle.